United States stands with Israel and with its people. Today, tomorrow, every day.
The good news is our support continues to grow. We're continuing to work to narrow the gap, and that's going on, and we're going to continue the meetings.
Because I care deeply about the country, I'm not frustrated for myself. I'm frustrated that the voters are getting robbed of the chance to really understand their alternatives.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. The United States House of Representatives is still without a speaker, and there is growing angst among Republicans in the chamber about their stalled debates on issues like aid to Israel, aid to Ukraine, and keeping the government open when funding runs out next month. I spent the day in the halls of the Capitol, and as of now, there is still lingering indecision about who should win the gavel and frustration, growing frustration, among the rank and file as some worry they're being cast back home as part of a dysfunctional Republican majority. There are still too many on the fence right now to support Steve Scalise, the Louisiana Republican, for Speaker of the House. And House Financial Services Chairman, Speaker pro tempore Patrick McHenry, is now seen as a possible consensus pick. But we will have to wait and see whose name is brought to the floor, if ever, and when all this happens, all as the war in Israel escalates. We begin tonight with Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. She is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Nicole, thank you for being here. We were just walking along the Capitol basement together, trying to figure out what's going on. As evening comes here in Washington, what's your latest read on whether Steve Scalise, the Louisiana Republican who's looked at the speakership for many years, does he have the votes? Can he get there?
Well, I think he's trying to, Bob. And as you know, the Scalise was a former whip, so that is his job and was his job and something he knows very well in terms of how to round up votes and rally them. We do know in this meeting with House Republicans earlier today, there really was a message of unity conveyed by the majority leader. But at the same time, as you very well know, as members emerged from that meeting, there was also a big sense of frustration. Many members still have a lot of grievances, continue to air them out during this discussion, and by and large, many of the members we spoke to feel that Scalise still does not have the votes to get there. That being said, I did talk to a member just a short time ago who was very close to Scalise, who was going into his office to try to get an update, and so he said that he does feel that they are making progress. We know Scalise was meeting with some of these holdout members, so the hope is he can try to flip some votes on his side, but again, it is still an uphill climb for the majority leader.
Scalise did address reporters briefly after that House Republican conference meeting. Let's listen to what he had to say.
The good news is our support continues to grow. We're continuing to work to narrow the gap, and that's going on, and we're going to continue the meetings. There's some other members that want to meet as a group individually.
This is rough and tumble politics, Nicole. When we were down there together reporting today, I was struck at how members were speaking publicly about Congressman Scalise and his cancer diagnosis. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Congresswoman from Georgia, brought that up inside the room, I'm told, and brought it up outside the room. Their concerns about his energy, his ability to fundraise. It's deeply personal to come at Scalise in that way. What were you hearing from other members about Scalise and whether he can get the votes, but also whether they have confidence in his ability to be Speaker?
Yeah, that's right. And also, let's not forget that Scalise was also shot back in 2018 at a congressional baseball practice. And so, there are a lot of concerns with respect to his health. Obviously, more recently, he was diagnosed with blood cancer. We saw even today the former president raise that as a potential concern. We know that he endorsed Jim Jordan. But look, members I talked to say, that they don't necessarily think that that's fair to, hold his health against him, even if some members do have concerns. Scalise has conveyed both publicly and to members that he does feel great, that he is up for the job, and he wouldn't be running for the speakership if he didn't think that he could do it. But that being said, I think there's just bottom line a sense of intransigence right now among members in terms of the path forward, whether anyone can reach that magic number of 217 or 218. Take a listen to what some Republican lawmakers told us after today's conference meeting.
I will say this. I mean, I will not be voting for Steve on the floor. So they better not force this to the floor.
Why not?
I've got strong disagreements with the way things were carried out yesterday, and we're going to figure this out here
But is
as
it
a
worth
conference.
holding that against him? I mean, time is not on your side.
Don't time's on my side. What's the time clock that's ticking? I mean, look, we've got.
You have a war in Israel.
Yeah, we've got a war in Israel. We can act.
Funding deadline November 17th.
We've got a war in Israel that Israel is perfectly capable of fighting.
You think you need more time?
Yeah, I think. What are you asking me? You should ask 200 and people in there. I mean, it's. I'm with Scalise, but we got to get to the right leader.
We came to Washington because we were frustrated, and there's real problems in America. We need to be solving those problems, so it's really frustrating for people like me.
So on one hand, you have some members saying, look, give us the time to work this out. But on the other, you have members like Congresswoman Jen Kiggins, who is from a swing district, who is like, look, we just need somebody. She's talking about, ships that are being deployed from her district to deal with this war in Israel and provide U.S. assistance and support. And so her point and the point of other members, Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, also expressing a lot of frustration now that, Republicans' focus really needs to be on the bigger task at hand, helping their constituents, helping the American people, not hashing things out over petty disagreement. So there still is this big divide among members as to whether they need to move forward with a vote now or whether they should give themselves the time to work through these issues they have until they can reach a consensus pick.
Nicole Killian, trenchant as ever. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
Israel is preparing for a possible ground offensive in Gaza. The two sides are trading rocket fire as the war intensifies. At least 2,500 people have died in the conflict. 27 Americans have died. At least 14 are still missing. In Israel today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and spoke about the Hamas attacks.
Everywhere we've gone, we've met people who've been touched in one way or another by Hamas's bloody hand. A loved one, a friend, a classmate, a neighbor, a colleague, killed, maimed, missing. We encountered a nation knit together by grief, but also a nation united in resolve. The United States shares that resolve.
CBS News foreign correspondent Ian Lee joins us now from Tel Aviv, Israel. Ian, thank you so much for being here and for your reporting. What are the Israelis doing to prepare for a possible ground offensive?
Well, Robert, the first thing that Israel is doing is calling up 360,000 reservists. These are people, everyday Israelis, who are being called back to military duty. They are going to be going down to that southern border, many of them. Israel's also moving a lot of their heavy equipment down there to the border. It is going to take some time before any ground invasion could happen. I remember back in 2014, it took about 10 days before they were ready, they were deployed, they were in position before a ground incursion could happen. So this is a much larger scale, one of the largest mobilizations in the country's history. So it is going to take some time, but Israel is moving troops and equipment to the places for that ground incursion to happen. Robert?
On the leadership level, Prime Minister Netanyahu was forceful in his remarks. What exactly did he have to say about the war?
Well, he has come out strong, and the prime minister needs to. This is the biggest intelligence failure, really, many people are saying, in the country's history. And so he has been saying that he is going to hit Hamas harder than Hamas hit Israel. And that's why we're seeing right now a lot of these airstrikes right now in Gaza. More than 1,300 people have been killed. And this is going to be a sustained period of airstrikes. And the prime minister wants to send that message to Hamas that this isn't something that Israel is going to take lightly, but it is going to be difficult for the prime minister moving forward to show that power that he wants to project, especially after that lapse that happened.
Beyond the prime minister, what's your latest read on how the Israeli government, broadly speaking, is responding to this war and the unity government?
Yeah, Robert, what's interesting about this unity government is it is bringing in members of the opposition, most notably Benny Gantz. Now, this is a former head of the Israeli military. He was in charge of the Israeli military the last time they went into Gaza in 2014. This is someone who knows especially what to do on the ground. There are a number of generals that have been brought into this war cabinet. And this is a projection of strength, a projection of confidence to the Israeli public, a public that is really shocked and stunned about what happened last weekend. And that's one thing they want to project, but also it is a competence thing. You do have these generals who know how to fight. They've been fighting before. And so they do want to have them in that war cabinet. The one thing, though, is noticeable is that not all the members of the opposition are taking part of this. Yair Lapid, another main figure in the opposition, says he's doesn't want any part of it, at least for the moment. He wants Prime Minister Netanyahu to resign. Robert?
Ian Lee, thank you. The Republican stalemate over the Speaker's gavel has left the House paralyzed. We'll discuss which potential compromises could unite this Republican conference. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. The House does remain at a standstill as Steve Scalise, the Louisiana Republican, struggles to collect the votes necessary to be elected Speaker. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is now calling on the GOP to end their, quote, civil war. Leanne Caldwell and Major Garrett join us now. Leanne is the co-author for the Washington Post 202 newsletter and an anchor for Washington Post Live. Major is CBS News' chief Washington correspondent. Great to have all of you here. We began with Nicole on the show talking about the stalled talks among Republicans on Capitol Hill. Let's take it a step further. Let's begin with Leanne. And Major, you pipe in about your analysis and reporting. If not Steve Scalise, who?
Well, there's...
Spin the big speaker wheel.
I know. So you can answer that a couple ways. There is very few people on Capitol Hill right now who think that there is a consensus candidate, that there is a candidate who can find 217 Republican votes on the House floor to be Speaker of the House. Now, that's perhaps the reality. What is happening, though, is that members are starting to talk about who that next person is going to be. For example, my sources tell me that Tom Emmer, the whip right now, who is running for majority leader, is making calls to be the majority leader should Scalise pull this out. Those calls, I'm told, are devolving into Republicans he's talking to asking him to run for Speaker. There's another option, perhaps just give the temporary Speaker, Patrick McHenry, right now more power. And then, you know, there's a couple other names like Tom Cole. Maybe they create some sort of coalition government with Democrats. But right now, all of this is really fantasy land until Scalise can either bow out or clinch the nomination, which is not likely.
But Scalise is not going to bow out until he goes round and round and round several times to try to see if he can get close to 217. And maybe he makes the calculation if he's at 210, 212, bring it to the floor and use the dynamics of the floor, the pressure of public view to push people across the finish line. We're a long way from there, but he's not going to give up after a day and a half. Patrick McHenry is also being talked about, as Leanne said. And there's an important person who no one in this audience has ever heard of before, Jason Smith. You know who Jason Smith is? He's the parliamentarian of the House. People are going to him right now and saying, is it possible for you to agree under House rules to expand the powers of the temporary speakership so the House can actually do a couple of things, maybe not under the auspices of a full speaker, but with Patrick Henry as Speaker pro tem, do some things to allow the House to function. These questions are now being asked and answered completely off the books in an unprecedented way. Again, that word, unprecedented. Yeah. And so there are these other options. And though it is a very, very, very long shot, he hovers on the side. The former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy.
Matt Gaetz, the congressman from Florida,
but
he would never vote for him.
He wouldn't. But he has allies who want him to say, I'm not ruling it out. Any of these things are possible, but nothing will come to the fore until Scalise has exhausted his game plan.
Let's dig into that. Major brought up the question of whether Scalise, and when he comes to the floor, whether he tries to win this on the floor, almost like he's rolling the dice, doesn't have the votes, but hopes the pressure cooker of a floor vote for Speaker could make it happen for him. When or do you even believe Scalise is going to bring this to the floor? Or having covered him for a while, do you believe he's going to hold back privately until he really has the votes?
Yeah, so that's one of the questions that's happening right now. They are trying to figure out, and there's two frames of thought here. Some say you go to the floor and at least show where everyone stands, because it's only been a secret ballot behind closed doors right now. So everyone will be on the record and see how much he wins by or how much he loses by. There's the other thought that it's just, if he loses, it's another instance of showing that Republicans are unable to govern, that it's just more chaos. They can't get anything done. They can't even choose a leader. And then right before I came here, I spoke to one Republican member who said the going to the floor theory is very dangerous, because then you could vote again. How many people want to vote against Donald Trump, who has backed Jim Jordan, and who wants to vote against Jim Jordan? And once 5 people have already voted against Scalise, then the barn door is open, and it could just be a runaway.
And Democrats
attempt.
are watching this. They could always decide to vote for somebody else or vote for vote present.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There are a lot of legislative.
Once you throw the floor open, lots of things can happen. And this goes back to the cycle that Kevin McCarthy went through that long week when he finally secured the speakership. Leanne knows this, you know this, I know this. Afterwards, Republicans said, you know what? It was a brutal, chaotic public process, but we came together. We talked our differences out. That's now a fallacy, because all the same dynamics that forced Kevin McCarthy to go to 15 votes are present now. And if anything, they've incentivized people to hold their vote, to become individual king or queen makers, and keep themselves out of the collaborative process of a functional House Republican conference to get whatever they want on precisely their terms. Those incentives have not diminished. They've only increased, complicating Scalise's efforts.
Yeah, just take a step back here. Like, this is the end of a second week where the House floor has been completely paralyzed. Last week they spent kicking out their speaker, and then they adjourned because they all hated each other so much. This week they're trying to elect a new speaker. Meanwhile, you have just over a month. Government funding runs out again. Any day now, you're going to have an emergency supplemental from the administration about Israel. There's all these real-world things that are happeing that Congress can't get to.
Can an emergency supplemental even move through the House without a speaker?
Back to these conversations with Jason Smith, the parliamentarian. Is there a way, if the House votes to do this, and maybe House Republicans could vote to do this? We don't have a speaker yet, but we want to do a couple of things. We will invest by a rule vote on the floor this speaker pro tem with specific select powers to advance a couple of things, just to get things moving a little bit.
I think every constitutional scholar in the country would be feasting on whether that's even legal.
But under the Constitution, if the House, through a majority vote, votes this as a new rule, at least can govern for the temporary time being. These kind of conversations are going on.
The unprecedented then is a new precedent is set. And that's part of what they are also deciding.
Yeah.
What a world. When you can't make laws, maybe you rewrite the rules in the House of Representatives. Leanne Caldwell and Major Garrett, thank you very much. Former President Donald Trump is polling ahead of the 2024 Republican field. I spoke to Governor Doug Burgum about calls for some Republican hopefuls to drop out. That's next. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. There are growing calls for some Republican candidates to drop out of the race and coalesce around an alternative to former President Donald Trump. But some Republican candidates are bucking those calls. And I spoke to Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota about his own plans.
George Will wrote an article last summer, the most qualified presidential candidate you've never heard of. That's our challenge. We just got to get our name out there. But we're happy warriors, and we're excited about the opportunity. We believe in America. We believe in freedom and liberty. We believe in driving the power back to the states and back to the people.
George Will did write that. He also just wrote this week that Senator Tim Scott should drop out of the race and endorse former Ambassador Nikki Haley. What's your response to whether it's George Will or Newt Gingrich or others who say this field has to consolidate to give oxygen in the room, politically speaking, for a real Trump alternative to emerge in the race?
I say that This is one of the reasons why my favorite president is Theodore Roosevelt, because at the turn of the century last year, he said, wow, we got party bosses and political insiders and pundits and media, the big newspapers at the time, trying to figure out who the candidate should be in both parties and trying to narrow the field and block people. And he really promoted the idea of the presidential primary. He said, let the people rule. And 98% of the delegates will be available after the New Hampshire primary is over. No one has to panic. No one's got to drop out. Competition is good for the Republican Party. It's good for America. Everybody plays in those two entities if they want to. And when they play in those two entities, then those voters, not the pundits, those voters are the ones that actually get to narrow the field. That's the way democracy works in America.
Are you confident you're going to make the debate stage for the next Republican primary debate?
I'm confident that we're going to make it, and if we don't make it, this is, people say presidential debate like there's some gravitas around this. This is a reality TV show for a couple hours. And I talked to plenty of people that said, I watched it and I'm never going to get those 2 hours back, because it's not actually helping the American people understand the strengths and weaknesses of the candidates.
Have you complained to the Republican National Committee about your concerns?
I haven't, because I don't complain about the rules. I understand that people make the rules. There two people are making the rules inside of a clubhouse. They set the rules, and there's plenty of other people weighing in. And they said we weren't going to make the first one, we made it. We weren't going to make the second one, we made it. You and I could actually be talking about policies that matter to the American people right now, but instead we talk about a process question of, are you going to make it? And it actually, even to people in Iowa and New Hampshire, doesn't matter that much, because they've got a chance to actually meet candidates and hear them, and they're making their decisions. And that's why the polls are changing. That's why 5 out of the 7 winners in Iowa weren't leading a month before the contest in the last decade. Same in New Hampshire. These things get decided in January. 75% of the voters in those states right now aren't even really paying attention to the presidential primary. It's still early. So there's a lot of movement that goes on, just like in the football season. And we're excited about, we're planning to be there when the playoffs start.
I saw you were just out in Utah at Senator Mitt Romney's E2 summit. A lot of major donors were out there. What was the reception for you among Romney's inner circle?
Well, Paul Ryan, also a number of other potential Senate candidates that are coming forward, a great set of business leaders from around the country, and the reception couldn't have been more positive. I mean, it was, of course, when you're talking to a group of people that have created jobs and built businesses, and you're the only job creator, the only business leader who's also then taken those business skills and shown how you can actually shrink government. It's one thing to win in 2016. We won in 2020 by 40 points.
But what are they saying to you behind the scenes? A lot of them must know you even personally from your business work over the years. What are they saying to you about your campaign?
They're saying, we love what you're doing. We love the messaging. Hang in there, keep going. And plenty of them are saying, hey, how can we help? And getting their checkbooks out. So it's fantastic to be in a group like that, because those people actually understand the power of what executive leadership could mean when translated into government.
So you're in it. There's no question about it. You're playing for the early contests. All this chatter in Washington, you seem to be ignoring it. You're in the race, and you're running to win.
You got it. That's the headline right there, because, I'm not selling a book. I'm not running to be a cabinet officer. It's flattering when people say, oh, you'd be a great cabinet officer, A, B, C, D.
Not running to be on the ticket with Trump or anyone else?
No. This is all I've ever done my whole life is either be the CEO or the chairman of something. And when I've done that, ask my shareholders. The amount of wealth I've created for other people, it's why people are willing to invest in what we're doing, because they know that they can trust me. They know I operate with integrity. We know that we'll have a mission, a plan, a strategy, and that we're going to drive results. And they know, and people now know that all of this that I'm doing right now is out of a heart of service. There's lots of other things that we could be doing, but I do this because I care about the country.
And one thing I noticed listening to you for over an hour here is you never bring up former President Donald Trump. This is your message. Is there a reason you just decide not to go there, whether it's on policy or politics?
Well, I don't criticize any of the other candidates either, because I feel like when you're the least well-known candidate, I learned this when we were a startup company. I went to my first Comdex in 1983, and we're a 10-person startup. I thought there was about 8 other companies that were going to be selling accounting software on PCs. I got there, I picked up the trade show thing. There were 63 accounting software companies. I had just bet the farm literally mortgaged the one asset that I had to put into this company. There's no internet. I had done all the research I thought I could do. All of a sudden, I got 8 times as much competition as I thought. I didn't decide, oh, let's change strategy and start attacking the market leaders. Anybody that walked by our booth, we said, we need to tell you about what we'll do for you, not about what the other guy won't or what the other guy did or didn't do. And we did that, and that's how we built our reputation.
That does it for today. You're streaming CBS News.